hypertonic saline is something which is being used too often these days in the intensive care units all over the world. And the present talk for the next 1 hour would be to discuss on the science behind the use of hypertonic saline in neurosurgical practice. Well, it's always good to see faces of our friends in this lockdown period, because it's difficult these days to identify people just by their body habitus and their glasses. It's always good to see them again in such webinars. The learning objective for this present webinar is to know the current proposed indications of hypertonic saline in neurosurgical practice, to know how does it work, dosages and durations which are being discussed in various researches, its role in ICU, perioperative management, the adverse reactions and the contraindications which we have to know about. And then definitely I will go through the literature, the current literature available till as recent as 2020 about hypertonic saline. Well, I have nothing to disclose except for the fact that for the next 1 hour, we all will be sitting. So it's always better an idea to keep your limbs stretched out. And as soon as this webinar is over, to get out of your seat and walk around so that you don't develop DVT or any other problems. So jokes apart, the current indication which the current literature states for hypertonic saline is for symptomatic severe hyponatremia, as we all have been using. It has also seen its increasing role in management of acute intracranial hypertension, particularly in patients with traumatic brain injuries, as well as in stroke patients. It is also being used as a resuscitative fluid for hemorrhagic shocks, as well as is now becoming a darling of anesthesiologists for perioperative use to relax brain. And now the researches are on where they have found its application even in spinal cord injury patients. So it all started in 1919 when Weed and Kibben et al. Did a studies on etherized cat, and then they found that the brain parenchyma can be reduced by using hypertonic saline. That was the start of hyperosmolar therapy. During that time, it was a revolutionary study, because still then, the study done by Monroe and Kelly in 1783, which stated that brain volume is constant, was widely held. And that's why this was a direct contraindication to this wide approved hypothesis during that time. So sooner, gluria and later mannitol was used as hyperosmolar therapy. Mannitol, even being used in clinically introduced in 1961, it still has only level 2 evidence to support its usage over this last 51 years. Brain Trauma Foundation had actually supported the belief that hyperosmolar agents are useful in severe TBI. However, hypertonic saline again got introduced in the clinical practice in 1985 with Todd et al. Paper. And since 1990s, it has seen increasing use in various scenarios where the cerebral edema as well as the cerebral perfusion pressure is to be maintained. So these clinical indications have actually garnered its role. Now, if we see this study, this was published in 2018, it was basically a meta-analysis and a systematic review of over 55 randomized clinical trial and 7 meta-analysis for the use of mannitol. It did find that the mannitol is effective in accomplishing short-term clinical goals in traumatic brain injury patients. However, it did not translate into the long-term clinical outcome of these patients. Even in elective craniotomies, when compared to hypertonic saline, mannitol was less likely to lead to satisfactory brain relaxation. It was more associated with increased fluid intake, increased urine output, and decreased serum sodium concentration. And also together, mannitol was also associated with the dose-dependent complications, most often hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, as well as acute renal failure. And there comes the role of hypertonic saline because of its advantages over many other things. We all know that 20% mannitol is equiosmolar to 3% saline, as it is to a combination of 10% mannitol and 10% glycerol. As for this oncotic pressure actually helps to retain the fluid inside the intravascular component, as well as it draws the fluid back from interstitium in intravascular area. The point to note is about reflection coefficient. It is a relative permeability of the blood-brain barrier to the osmolytes. Now, sodium has a reflection coefficient of 1. That is to say, it is a completely impermeable as compared to mannitol, which is 0.9. 0 is completely permeable. So sodium is in that sense is absolutely impermeable to blood-brain barrier if in case it is intact. Hence, it causes contraction of the blood-brain tissue or brain tissue by drawing the fluid out of the intracellular area. It also reduces the production of the CSF, leading to reduction of the ICP. as well as restores sodium concentration, restoring the essential neuronal sodium cotransporter, which I will be talking in the further slides. Apart from this oncotic response, it also has a positive response on pressures. Intravascular volume is increased because it draws fluids from the interstitial spaces, leading to the increase in mean arterial pressure. And because of this increase in the MAP, as well as simultaneous reduction of the intracranial pressure, it has to shown to increase the cerebral perfusion pressure and prevent the cerebral ischemia, which is the cause of secondary brain injury in traumatic brain injury patients. And also being said that the hypertonic saline is safe to use in patients with serum osmolality of more than 320 milliequivalents per liter, which in fact is a contraindication for use of further use of mannitol. It also has positive effect on circulatory system. Hypertonic saline decreases plasma viscosity by increasing the water content, and henceforth it increases or makes the erythrocyte movements very smooth, improving the continuous oxygen supply to the end organs. By its release of prostacyclin from endothelial cell, it causes vasodilation and both at the arterial level as well as prevents the ischemia due to less accumulation of platelets in those small vessels. And as it increases the sodium concentration, it also induces the endothelium to releases EDRF and endothelial, which actually causes vasodilation further. It also acts to balance the neurotransmitter. Particularly in the trauma, the neuronal depolarization leads to excess release of glutamate. Ischemia, because of the situation of generation of low ATP environment, disturbs the balance of sodium-potassium active transporter, reversing the sodium glutamate cotransporter and increases the extracellular glutamate. Now, this high intracellular sodium opens the calcium channel, transfers water to the cells, and expands the channels on the surface, releasing more glutamate and leading to the cell death beyond repair. Hypertonic saline does just the opposite. It increases the sodium outside of the cell. Henceforth, it returns the sodium potassium pump, restores the sodium glutamate pump, and then causing glutamate reuptake restores the static membrane potential. Besides this, hypertonic saline has also been shown to have positive immunological effect. It has an immune modifying capacity by decreasing the migration adherence of the leukocyte, reducing CD11B expression in leukocyte and neutrophils. It interferes with polymorphonuclear leukocytes. It reduces the pro-inflammatory molecule and increases the anti-inflammatory cytokines, and also restricts the bacterial transports in the body, improving the T cells functions, co-stimulating production of the interleukin-2 and boosting phagocytosis. Besides this, because of its effect on the pressure response, it also increases the preload and decreases the afterload, increasing the overall cardiac output as well as the stroke volume of the patients. Now, these effects are not being seen with the mannitol. Hence, with the combined effect of improved hemodynamics, vasoregulation, decreased cerebral edema, as well as modifying the cellular immunological response, it increases the cerebral perfusion and decreases the ICP, avoiding the secondary brain injury. Henceforth, its role in traumatic brain injury has been seen to be of paramount. Now, when we do a head-to-head comparison to mannitol, besides having an oncotic response because of so many other roles which the hypertonic saline has physiologically on the body, it also being used as a small volume resuscitation fluid for hemorrhagic shock, is being used as an alternative to hypotensive patients, and it's been also being helpful to reduce the lung injury after hemorrhagic shock and improves the cardiac output. So these things are not being seen with the use of mannitol. Now, mannitol, as we have already discussed, has a lot of dose-dependent side effects. Hypertonic saline has been seen to have lesser of these side effects. Central pontine malinosis, which we consider to be one of the most important side effects, is usually seen in those patients who are having hyponatremia. Patients with normonatremia has not been recorded to have central pontine malinosis by increasing in the serum sodium level. As well as the effect on the coagulation system, mannitol has been shown to cause coagulopathy together with other colloids like dextran. Hypertonic saline has been shown to have less of its effect. Now, when we talk of electrolyte disturbances these two agents cause, it is almost the opposite, where the mannitol causes hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, hypochloremia. The hypertonic saline actually causes hypernatremia, hypokalemia, and hyperchloremic acidosis, and it is used for a longer time. So hypertonic saline has been seen to provide a more robust and durable effect in lowering the ICP, which we'll be talking in the further studies as I come through. Now, talking about the possible dosages of the hypertonic saline. Now, there are two things when we talk of any dosage of a drug. One is the concentration and one is the mode of delivery, that is either a bolus or a infusion. Now, first of all, we talk of concentration. So anything which is more than 0.9%, that is weight per volume, it has been seen to be effective in controlling the pressure and restoring the normal balance in the system. More than 10% of the concentration actually exposes the tight connection of the blood-brain barrier, leading to the increase in the pressure. So there has been seen that there is an inverse ratio between the intracranial pressure and the serum sodium concentration. So clinically relevant concentration has been found to between 1% to 23.4%. So 0.9% is basically an isoosmolar, so it has nothing to do with our talk, but something which is more than 1%, that is 2%, 3%, and to 23.4% have been shown to have clinically relevant role in managing edema of the brain. Now, regarding this hypertonic saline, there was a study by Qureshi et al. In mongrel dogs who were euthanized. This was done in 1999, where he compared the effect of 3% saline with hypertonic saline 23.4% versus mannitol. What he found that 23.4% hypertonic saline, which was of a high concentration, actually achieves a greater reduction in ICP within 15 minutes. However, the effect of the 3% hypertonic saline was much more sustained. Now, the studies on hyponatremia has also shown that a human can actually sustain a level of a maximum increase in serum sodium every day of around 10 to 20 milliequivalents per liter. Now, it is advisable to titrate the hypertonic saline concentration to achieve the desired effect on ICP, serum osmolarity, and serum sodium concentration. Patients are seemingly able to tolerate sodium level up to 155 to 160 milliequivalent liters as per reported by various literature. There is definitely a problem with use of higher concentrations, as it causes increase in the creatine level, can cause acute renal failure, can lead to thrombocytopenia, neutropenia, anemia, as well as cause ARDS. So the finding for optimal concentration that can effectively reduce ICP without any potential adverse side effect is still $1 million question as being researched upon. Now we talk of bolus versus infusion. Now, most of these clinical studies have shown, have either used 7.5% hypertonic saline as boluses and a lower concentration, that is 3% as infusion. Now, high concentration, which when used as a bolus, depends upon what concentrate are we using. If you're using 3% hypertonic saline, we can give a volume of 150 mils as a bolus. 7.5% can be given as a dose of 75 mils per bolus. And 23.4% hypertonic saline can be given as a bolus dose of 30 mils over a period of 15 minutes. Now, lower concentration of hypertonic saline, that is 2 or 3%, are commonly given as infusion. Now, the rate is 0.1 to 2 mils per kg per hour. What we have seen in clinical practice, safe would be 25 mils per hour, irrespective of the body weight in an adult child, in an adult patient. However, in children, we have to titrate it on a lower scale, and the recommended studying scale is 0.1 to 1 milliliter per kg per hour. And in pediatric age patient, particularly, we target not to increase the serum osmolarity by more than 360 milliosmoles per liter. So we need to check on the osmolarity as we give the patients the transfusion for a longer period. Now, how long is another question. Hypertonic saline administration as a prolonged infusion is not seen to be favorable. Tolerance develops. Now, this tolerance develops because of the permeability of the cerebral osmolytes, which are nothing but polyhydric alcohols, amino acids, methylamines from the interstitial spaces into the intracellular one. And henceforth, it actually negates the osmotic gradient which was developed by the sodium. So henceforth, the hypertonic saline, if in case it is continued further, particularly in a continuous infusion format, does not work after 3 days. So it is recommended that after 3 days, if the hypertonic saline is required, then we have to give bolus doses rather than continuous infusions. Now, sodium is therapy or hypertonic therapy is not advisable if in case it achieves its target. Now, the target is the ICP is less than 15 millimeter mercury, as has been shown by Harut Junian et al. In 2005, or the patient's symptoms related to raise in the ICP improves. Also, it is advisable to stop the therapy if in case the serum sodium level goes above 155 milliosmoles per liter, according to the SOS trial, which is in vogue right now. Now, studies have shown its use not only in adult patients, but also in pediatric patients. In pediatric patients, the present recommendation is by Brain Trauma Foundation itself is to identify, which has identified hypertonic saline as a first-line drug for increased ICP, as it has fastest resolution and favorable cerebral hemodynamics. with a low rate of adverse events. It has been seen in a few of the studies that even an IV bolus of 23.4% given at a dose of 25 mils per kg within a period of 3 minutes have been easily tolerated. However, this is only in few cases, and that's why we should not go in these of the extreme cases. However, continuous infusions, if in case it is continued for a longer time, can cause hypernatremia, and if sustained over the severe days, can cause severe side effects. According to a survey by American Academy of Pediatricians as well as American College of Emergency Physicians Pediatric Group in 2018, it was a survey where they were asked about various questionnaires regarding the use of mannitol over 3% saline. They responded that hypertonic saline is frequently being preferred over mannitol in level 1 trauma centers, and the most commonly selected dose volume option is 3% hypertonic saline in IV boluses over less than 15 minutes. So this means that hypertonic saline is being ever increasingly being used in pediatric patients. Now we talk of hemorrhagic strokes. Now, Qureshi et al. In the study which I have mentioned about earlier in 1999, when he was using this canine model, he was actually implanting a blood clot inside the brain near the region of the basal ganglia. And there also he found that 3% hypertonic saline actually reduces the ICP significantly as compared to the mannitol, and also maintains a higher cerebral perfusion pressure and lower water content in the lesions. Saying et al. In 2007 also found its role in poor grade spontaneous SAH. Now we'll talk of the systematic review. This was basically a guide presented as a guideline by Neurocritical Care Society in 2020, where they have evaluated all the evidences, even though the quality of evidence was poor in terms of lot of heterogeneity amongst them, as well as the biasness could not be removed in most of the trials. They did recommend that in intracranial bleeding or intracranial hemorrhages, hypertonic saline has definitely an edge over mannitol to manage the intracranial pressure, and it can be used either on the base of symptom-based boluses or using a targeted sodium concentration when used as an infusion. In subarachnoid hemorrhage, however, symptom-based bolus dosing is preferable rather than a continuous infusion. However, a specific dosing to improve neurological outcome could not be made. In ischemic stroke, both hypertonic saline and mannitol has been shown to have equal effect. However, if the mannitol does not work in the first phase or in the initial phase, then hypertonic saline is definitely favorable in these cases. Now, in cases of hemorrhagic shock as a resuscitative fluid. Now, this was a meta-analysis which was actually done in 2017, studying around 12 studies involving 2,932 patients, of which the 6 trials compared 7.5% hypertonic saline with Ringer lactate, and 11 trials were comparing 7.5% hypertonic saline with dextran versus isotonic saline versus Ringer lactate. Now, in this analysis, they did not find that the hypertonic saline gave an additional survival benefit. But then they did find that it is a very good alternative resuscitative fluid, particularly in those patients who can develop a volume overload. So henceforth, they recommended that the hypertonic saline is a viable alternative resuscitation fluid in pre-hospital settings, where the patients cannot be worked up immediately and the patient requires immediate resuscitation. Now, regarding the darling of choice for the anesthesiologist in the perioperative management. Now, as we have all listened to the role of hypertonic saline in preventing hypertension, preserving cerebral blood flow, as well as reducing hematocrit, causing no coagulopathy, this is being used in penetrating trauma as per study by Wade et al. In 2003, where they actually found a survival advantage over other standard therapy when using a hypertonic saline. Intraoperatively, it is very good as compared to mannitol because it is very effective in maintaining the brain relaxation, maintaining the electrode balances, and arteriovenous oxygenation, because in intraoperative, you all know, we do not give hypertonic saline for endless a period. So that's why the abnormality or the alteration in electrolytes is far lesser. It also does not changes too much of urine output and blood lactate level. And in subsequent various meta-analysis, it has been shown that hypertonic saline is far more effective than mannitol in decreasing the ICP. Now, these are the various studies which have been shown to have a positive effect of hypertonic saline over mannitol in intraoperative period. A spinal cord injury is a research field for use of hypertonic saline. In animal studies, they have found that by using hypertonic saline, it increases the regional spinal cord flow, it decreases the spinal cord water content, and provides protection after the mechanical injury. And if in case used within 24 hours, it has a best results. But human studies are very limited. Henceforth, it is just on an investigational platform right now. Now, we can actually enhance the effect of hypertonic saline by adding colloids, particularly dextran, because it decreases the hydraulic permeability in activated endothelium, and henceforth sustaining the effect for more than 2 to 4 hours and improving the safety because it does not allow the osmolytes to leak back into the brain. Henceforth, everything which is having an osmotic gradient remains inside the intravascular compartment, leading to a sustained effect of these hypertonic saline over the brain edema. Now, since we know that the hypertonic saline has an effect on brain, kidney, and the heart, the various side effects or the adverse events which can actually occur with the use of hypertonic saline can be actually thought of. Osmotic demyelination syndrome is something which is the most dreaded one, but then it has not been reported in normonatremics. It is one of the complications when the patient's sodium level is hypercorrected in particularly patients with hyponatremia. Now, blood-brain barrier disruption, if in case it is massive and diffuse, it can actually cause rebound cerebral edema because of the leaking membranes can actually allow the sodium to percolate inside the interstitial spaces. Fluid resuscitation, if in case serum hypertonic saline is being used for, then for the first 8 hours, the serum sodium level actually gets elevated very fast, and it may remain elevated for 3 days after administration. And it has also been seen, particularly in the children, that whenever the hypertonic saline is used for a longer period, it can actually generate coma and seizures, as well as by causing a contraction of the brain volume, it can cause shearing of the cerebral veins, leading to subdural hematoma and SAH in these patients. Also, the chances of renal failure is almost 4 times higher if in case it is used as a fluid for resuscitation in a larger volume. And if in case it is given over a longer period, it can generate hyperchloremic acidosis and hypokalemia. Otherwise, the other thing which is of much importance for us is that if any concentration hypertonic saline is used more than 1%, then we have to use a central venous catheter to transfuse this fluid. Why? Because it can cause phlebitis, and henceforth the effect can be negative. Now, there are various contraindications of any drug, but FDA, if in case we want to go to their website, it does not show any known specific contraindications to hypertonic saline. But we all know in general practice, hypertonic saline is definitely not to be used if the patient has severe hypernatremia or the patient has volume overload. And definitely we have to generate caution if in case patient has congestive heart failure and renal insufficiency before we use hypertonic saline. Now, by doing all this, it may appear that we know many things about hypertonic saline, but if in case we read between the lines, there are still many dilemma. The dilemma exists regarding the proper method of use. There are a lot of studies which are actually talking about various concentrations of hypertonic saline. One is better than the other. Similarly, some studies shows better result with infusion rather than bolus doses. So there is definitely a dilemma in that. Then the second thing is that all the effect which has been studied in all these studies have been shown to either decrease the intracranial pressure, decrease the cerebral edema, and cause less of the side effect. But then none of them actually talk of the various long-term neurological outcomes, or in say other words, regarding the survival of these patients by use of hypertonic saline. So I looked for the current evidences for this particular role. There were more than 21,000 studies for hypertonic saline in cerebral edema. So whenever we are studying all these studies, it's always important for us to understand the context of these studies. Otherwise, a beautiful performance of Kuchipudi would actually appear like players sitting for a cricket match. Well, I will begin with the systematic analysis done within the last 5 years. So first of all, I will talk of this study which was published in 2015. This was a systemic review of around 7 RCTs involving 169 patients. And this systematic review was done during that time when all the systematic review published till the period of 2014 did not find anything conclusive. So when they were comparing the hypertonic saline to mannitol, they did find that the ICP was reduced very effectively. Not within the first 30 minutes, but after 60 minutes and 120 minutes, there were definitely a lot of control of ICP, and without any significant differences in serum osmolarity between the patient's group. So the authors recommended that hypertonic saline is more effective than mannitol for reducing ICP in cases of traumatic brain injury. But then mind you, this is only when they are talking about control of ICP. Now, another meta-analysis, which was published in 2016, actually looked into the outcome of this patient in terms of mortality as well as the Glasgow outcome score positive values. Now, they actually studied 11 RCTs involving 1,820 patients. However, because of the heterogeneity in these studies, not all studies could be involved for a meta-analysis. So what they found are the 4 RCTs which were discussing on the mortality issues did not find that the hypertonic saline actually decreases the mortality as compared to mannitol or other hyperosmolar agents. 6 RCTs did find that the patients had some ICP control, but then it was not significant enough. And 2 RCTs did not find that the hypertonic saline improves the GOSE. And only 1 study talked of adverse event without any significant differences. So based on these evidences, the meta-analysis authors did not recommend hypertonic saline over mannitol as a first-line agent for severe TBI. Then came another study which was published in 2018. This was a meta-analysis again of 12 RCTs involving 438 patients. And they did find that the ICP was maximally reduced, but again, similar to the previous meta-analysis, they did not find any significant improvement in the functional outcome and mortality. And that's why they also recommended that hypertonic saline cannot be considered better than mannitol as a first-line therapy for elevated ICP, particularly caused by traumatic brain injury. However, because of its effect in refractory intracranial hypertension, hypertonic saline seems to be preferred. Now, this was the forest plot which these studies have actually found its uses for. Now, taking the 4 of these RCTs, which was done in these which was taken into consideration in this meta-analysis, Cochrane in 2020 actually published a very recent meta-analysis involving 2 more RCTs done by Kumar and Patil in 2019. However, similar to the previous findings of the meta-analysis author, they also found similar limitations. Most of the studies were variable in their mode of drug administration. They have different follow-up times. The way of reporting changes in the ICP was very different. There was no uniform definition of uncontrolled ICP, and also no trial provided data for other outcomes of interest. So because of this high imprecision, indirectness, and the risk of biasness, they could not conclude very convincingly on what to do. But then they definitely concluded that immediate definite benefits of hypertonic saline did not translate into long-term benefits. Henceforth, there is no clear evidence to support use of hypertonic saline infusion over mannitol infusion for people with acute TBI. But there was definitely a silver lining to this particular analysis. Of all the things which was common in the other previous meta-analysis, they did find that the hypertonic saline in one of the RCTs has a favorable effect on short-term mortality as compared to the mannitol. Then there was another meta-analysis which was published in 2018, particularly looking at the cardiac output changes after osmotic therapy, neurosurgical and neurocritical care. And this actually studied 8 randomized clinical trials which enrolled 182 patients. And they did find that hypertonic saline exerted a more profound cardiac output augmentation than mannitol. And because of its role in decreasing the ICP reduction, it has a very positive effect on maintaining the cerebral perfusion pressure. So, and then we also found that the hypertonic saline promoted hypernatremia and mannitol-induced transient hypernatremia that was only for the period of 6 hours. So this particular systematic review also supported the use of hypertonic saline over the mannitol. Now, there's always a fact that whenever there are a lot of challenges, it actually creates a lot of opportunities for the future. So all this meta-analysis, the problem with the meta-analysis of all the RCTs which has been done over these years there had been the lack of uniformity. So the future consideration while designing a research, particularly when we are doing a research on hypertonic saline, is that we should use uniform definition for raised ICP and control. We should access optimal concentration and infusion time for any ICP lowering agent and collect report data on types of TBI, because many of the RCTs were not commenting upon the type of traumatic brain injury, as well as assess the long-term effect on death and neurological recovery and not just on ICP control. And it's always better to get the trial pre-registered, because then the chances are that we may be actually standardizing our trial protocols further before we jump on conducting a trial. And the result of the trial should be reported according to the consort. So again, it actually creates a lot of uniformity between the trials. And considering these facts, there are two trials which has not been started. One is sugar or salt trial, which is a UK-based study, multi-clinical, multi-centric trial, which is looking at the role of 20% mannitol as compared to 3% IV bolus dose of hypertonic saline in adult patients with traumatic brain injury with ICP of more than 12 millimeter mercury. And the other one is a French trial called COBE trial, or continuous hyperosmolar therapy. Now this is also ongoing, and it is actually comparing a standard care versus a continuous 20% sodium chloride as plus a standard care. So let's see what these particular two studies will report, and we look forward that maybe by 2021 or 22 we will have these results out, and then we can definitely have something more to add to the clinical protocol. Now, despite all this contraindications and a lot of confusion, there's definitely a role of guidelines of the societies, because whenever we are preparing a guideline, we also consider not only randomized clinical trials, but also retrospective studies and large central studies or cohort studies, which may not be completely randomized, but then with the low chances of biasness can also be included in the recommendation. So when in 2008, ATLS or advanced trauma life support did not find any data to support a recommendation for use of hypertonic saline, it was in 2016, the fourth edition of Brain Trauma Foundation guideline, which did recommend a hyperosmotic agent, but did not recommend any specific one. However, in 2019, Brain Trauma Foundation guideline for pediatric patients actually recommended hypertonic saline as the only agent for intracranial pressure management because of a lot of side effects related to mannitol. And in 2020, Neurocritical Care Society, which has also been accredited by American Academy of Neurology, actually prefers hypertonic saline over mannitol for initial management of elevated ICP in traumatic brain injury. And currently, Federal Drug Authority, that is FDA, approves 3% and 5% saline as for use in hyponatremia and increased intracranial pressure. And as well as in adult population, the hypertonic saline has become a mainstay of treatment because of more favorable side effect profile, more effective in lowering ICP and with a lower incidence of treatment failure. So with this, I end, and let me take any questions. Thank you all for your patience listening.
Thank you, Dr. Amit, for an excellent presentation on the topic. My personal feeling is myself, I am starting to prefer 3% saline over mannitol in many cases. And sometimes we even add mannitol and percent we give together. What are your comments on this? Adding the two, mannitol and 3% saline.
Well, there are studies where the people have used these two things in combination, and definitely the role is there whenever the edema is too high. But then what I actually feel is that using 3% saline and mannitol without intracranial pressure monitoring is like firing a shot in the dark. It's always better an idea if in case we can monitor the intracranial pressure, because as I have told in my presentation, the target should be the control ICP. If in case we have controlled the ICP further, then one of these medication can go down, continuing this medication as a whole. So it's always better to monitor the ICP and then give these medications either in combination or alone.
Hello, am I audible?
Oh, yes, yes, sir, please.
The other comment, yeah, Dr. Pawan, yes, please.
Sorry for the technical problem in the beginning, and I joined, but somehow I was not audible in the beginning. So it is really a very nice presentation. Hello?
Hello, sir, you're audible, sir, please say.
It is really a very nice presentation, but still I am seeing, I don't know all the centers working in Nepal, how many of them are using hypertonic saline in their regular practice. That is one. The another thing that Krishna Sharma has already put a question on it, what is your practice? And because still we, in our institute, we are using the mannitol. Although we know the hypertonic saline is the practice at present, that is one. as far as the outcome is concerned, one of the study has shown that the aim is to reduce the ICP and maintain the CPP. But maintaining CPP and reducing the ICP doesn't improve the outcome, because in 20% of the patients, there are hypoxic brain damage because maybe the duration of the ICP was too long. That could be the reason, or it is unmonitored. Therefore, now they are suggesting multi-monitoring system, and that includes measuring the oxygen in the jugular vein, and they are maintaining the that metabolic activities of the brain cells. Probably that may improve the outcome, but how much is possible in our setup, that is what I'm just sharing with you.
Okay, sir. Thank you for your comments. Well, I can see there's one question by Dr. Roka. Any studies comparing hypertonic saline with mannitol with steroids? Any 2 or 3 combination can lead to hyperosmolar syndrome. Definitely, I have tried to go through all these studies, and there is a study where they have tried to study the role of steroids, but then compare saline with mannitol. I'm afraid I have not come through any such study. But then steroid has completely been said as a no-no for traumatic brain injury. So as for the steroid should not be used for traumatic brain injury. So I can see Mohan sir also connecting. So Mohan sir, any comments on this?
Yeah, I had some problem initially.
Yes, sir.
Amit, great
Yes, sir.
presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I heard the later part, and 3% and normal 3% sodium chloride, 7% people used to use up to 21%.
Yeah, 23.4%.
Controversy, but and yeah. Hello.
Yes, Mohan, we are listening.
Yeah, I'm done. Dr. Panta, please go ahead.
It was a wonderful presentation, and Amit was actually, looks like you are in a very strong favor of using hypertonic saline.
No, sir. Okay.
And I think we should we should re-listen to what you said again. I think this will be uploaded, and then maybe we should use it more and more, you know. And my question is, can we, you said there is a limitation of use of, because it wears off, it wears off after some time, just like mannitol. So can we switch from one to another and then go back to another when we need to give, you know, this medicine for a long time?
Thank you, sir, for your comments and question. Let me first of all put forward that I'm not a fan of 3% saline as such, but then definitely the evidences are pouring in which supports the use of 3% saline. So as I have put forward in my presentation, that the effect fades off, particularly when we are using the continuous format of 3% saline. So if we are giving continuously 3% saline at least for 3 days, then there are chances that the effect may wean off. So it is being recommended that if we have to continue for a longer period, say for around more than 72 hours, then we may switch the continuous IV transfusion of 3% saline into IV boluses. And it's always better if in case we can titrate the concentration and the dosage of hypertonic saline with ICP monitoring. So here comes the role of ICP monitoring, because our end target is ICP. If in case ICP is controlled, then there is no role of adding a mannitol or even adding added more concentration or infusions, because any further drug in such situations are going to be associated with other further complications. So as little drug as possible. So if in case we can monitor these patients with ICP monitor, then that's the best.
Thank you.
So there is a comment from Dr. Roka. In his center, they are using hypertonic saline more often than mannitol. That's okay. And Dr. Rupendra Adhikari writes, why should mannitol and hypertonic saline be exclusive? We can use both as complement. We have talked about it. We haven't used hypertonic saline, is what Dr. Bal Gopal says. I think after listening to what Dr. Amit has made in the presentation, you can even go through the literature and try hypertonic saline. It can be useful in many instances. Dr. Amit, I have one question.
Yeah, please.
While giving hypertonic saline, would you prefer using it through the central venous line or through the peripheral line? Is it okay?
Yes, that's a very good question. Well, this has been documented in many studies that if we can give 3% saline through central venous line, it is always preferable, because any concentration which is more than 1% can cause phlebitis if in case we are giving it to the peripheral line. So I have gone through one of the paper which was actually suggesting that if you do not have a central venous line opened up immediately, you can try a 2% saline to begin with, which can be transfused through a peripheral line. And as soon as the central venous line is open, you can give a 3% saline. So this was from one of the authors in one of the research article he has presented. But my take is that if in case we have to give 3% saline, is always better to give through CVP.
I think we can do a study. We can do a study how frequently the thrombophlebitis occurs. We can ask some of the ICU nurses to document, and then can be a good article.
Good
I would
idea.
like to ask Dr. Rajiv, what are your comments? Dr. Rajiv, please. Audio mute, sir, Dr. Rajiv.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Amit, for wonderful presentation. I don't know, maybe I missed it, but I wanted to know about hemodynamics compared to mannitol, hypertonic saline, and isotonic saline. Any differences?
Yeah, definitely. So what happens is that it has a very positive hemodynamic effect. As I have told in my presentation, in talk of pressure responses, since it has an oncotic, it establishes an oncotic gradient, it pulls in all the interstitial fluid inside the intravascular convolution. So it increases the mean arterial pressure. It also increases the stroke volume because of the increase in the end-diastolic volume. And henceforth, it has a positive cardiac output phenomena. At the same time, since it has a vasodilatation effect because of the release of EDRF and prostacyclin, which I've talked about in one of my slides, it actually decreases the peripheral resistance. Henceforth, this is a drug of choice nowadays in many of the centers where they're using as a resuscitative fluid even in the patients who are having a severe hypertension, either because of sepsis or because of cardiogenic shock. So this is an additional role of 3% saline or hypertonic saline, which they have found in other centers. The best part of using hypertonic saline, particularly in hyper concentration, say for example in 23.4%, is that you are actually giving a very low volume. So chances of creating a volume overload by giving a lot of fluid from outside is far lesser as compared to the isoosmolar fluids. So say for example, you're giving 0.9% saline, you will be giving 2 liters, isn't it? But if you're using an hypertonic saline of 23.4% concentrate, you will be using a far lesser volume. So chances of creating a volume overload in terms of supplemental oxygen volume which you are giving is far lesser. Now that is the role of in comparison to the isoosmolar fluid. Now the other question was regarding the mannitol. Now mannitol actually causes osmotic diuresis at the same time. So because of this osmotic diuretic phenomena, it actually drains the fluid out of the body. So it actually causes much more of hemodynamic changes as compared to the hypertonic saline. So henceforth, the hypertonic saline has been found to have favorable hemodynamics as compared to the mannitol. And that is one reason why it is being too much favored by the intensivists. I hope I have answered your question.
I hope so, but I'll review the literature. But so far, I remember, I mean, looking at the MT or CBP, the studies had shown almost no differences. I have
Yeah,
to check.
definitely. So if you go through the RCTs, the problem for these RCTs is that one RCT will tell you one thing very convincingly, and the other RCT will definitely refute it. So when you go through meta-analysis, that's why I have actually, rather than talking of individual RCTs, which will be more than 55 in number if I have been talking about each of the RCTs, I actually talked of only 5 meta-analysis, which has been done over the last 5 years. So that was actually the cream of all the RCTs. They were actually done a heterogeneity-based study, they did a test for biasness, and on those results, they were actually giving a conclusion. So in one of the meta-analysis which I put forward, it published in 2018, which was looking at the cardiac output changes with the use of hypertonic saline as compared to mannitol, it definitely has shown a positive effect on cardiac output. So that was basically the gist of all the RCTs which was done over the period.
Thank you.
Rajiv,
So we
what
have-
is your practice? Have you started hypertonic saline, or is still mannitol is going on in your
So
institute?
in Nepal, only 3% saline is available right now. So we are only using 3% saline. But we are actually trying to get a higher concentration if in case it's feasible. So we are on a lookout. If in case it's possible, then we may try to bring it with the help of other neurosurgeons team with the community here.
I think if it is a prophylactic, if we are using it for prophylaxis, we use mannitol. But if it is therapeutic, probably we go for hypertonic is good.
Well, Dr. Rajiv, that's very well said. That actually summarizes the gist of all my talk. Hypertonic saline has not been shown to have a prophylactic role. It is for therapeutic, and that's why I've been asking times and again to monitor the ICP whenever we're using these types of therapy. So there is no role of generating an hypernatremia to settle the cerebral edema. So it has a role as a therapeutic agent and a prophylactic agent. Rightly said.
Dr. Amit, I want to add a few things. We have found a super fan of hypertonic saline in Pokhara.
Yeah.
Dr. Saval Sapkota says he's a super fan and he is using it regularly. Dr. Roka is also using hypertonic saline regularly.
So we can also
and
hear
I
them.
want to add
We can also hear their
one question which
experiences.
is there. Dr. Sagar Korela says, does the speaker want us to change our practice? So, does the speaker really want to change others' practice, or he wants others to go through the literature and then decide themselves?
Yeah, so this is what is evidence-based practice. We have the evidences in favor of hypertonic saline, even though the evidences are not that of high quality to speak of because of a lot of heterogeneity and the bias involved in a lot of these trials. But still, there are a lot of studies which actually favor hypertonic saline. So the evidence points towards its favorable use, but mind you, it is only for the control of ICP. As Pawan sir has also said that neither mannitol nor hypertonic saline has been shown to be having conclusively positive effect on long-term outcome. So neither the long-term mortality has been reduced, nor the Glasgow outcome score has been favorably being affected by the use of these hyperosmolar agents. So whenever the target is to control ICP,
but the Brain Trauma Foundation, the Brain Trauma Foundation in 2019 says for pediatrics. So that's the practice which our pediatricians are following in IOM as well.
Yeah,
so
that's
in
true.
pediatrics, I think in 2019, Brain Trauma Foundation says use hypertonic rather than mannitol.
Well, I have gone through this literature of the Brain Trauma Foundation, and if you also go through it, it is rather than the positive effect of hypertonic saline, which is seen in most of the studies, the problem with the mannitol in this age group is far more higher. And that's why it actually favors the use of hyperosmolar saline compared to mannitol.
Okay, any more questions or suggestions from the participants? Dr. Krishna Sharma pani hununthyo. Dr. Krishna, our president.
Namaste.
Sir.
It was a very nice and brainstorming presentation. Thank you very much, Amit. And a lot of controversies and highlights. I have no personal experience of using 3%, but after a lecture, I definitely want to try. But I want to hear what Roka and Sabal has been also experiencing. Any problem they have particular faced because they have been using quite frequently. How about you, Amit? Also, have you been using? What is your protocol?
Yes, so for the last 2 years, I've been using 3% saline, but then rather than using IV boluses, I am much more in favor of using a continuous infusion with ICP monitoring, if in case it's possible, to avoid hypernatremia, which is very much associated with a continuous infusion of hypertonic saline. I like to limit the infusion rate to 25 mils per hour, particularly in the adults. Even though the literature has said of a higher transfusion rate, I like to keep it 25 mils per hour because it has avoided hypernatremia being developing in most of my patients. Regarding the other hypertonic solutions, 23.4%, since it's not available in Nepal, so I don't have an experience in Nepalese population with this product. I will definitely look forward to hear from Dr. Yam and Dr. Shabal also.
Are you suggesting that, excuse me, are you suggesting that we do invasive ICP monitoring in every patient of raised ICP to use 3% saline?
So that's in the recommendation. That's in the recommendation for patients with a severe traumatic injury.
Since they're using it, what do you do?
So if the patient has a severe traumatic brain injury, we definitely like to go for an ICP monitoring. And in those cases, hypertonic saline can be used in conjunction with the ICP monitoring. However, for the moderate grade TPIs, if in case ICP catheter can be placed, that definitely a way to go ahead. But again, the problem in our scenario is, particularly in my scenario, is that we are using intraventricular ICP monitoring rather than intraparenchymal. And in some of these patients who is having massive brain edema, the ventricles are so chinked that you cannot actually place an intraventricular catheter. So in that scenario, ICP monitoring is a little bit difficult. However, if in case we have intraparenchymal catheters, definitely it's something which we should be doing as per the guidelines suggested by Brain Trauma Foundation.
What is Dr. Roka's practice?
Hello.
Yeah, Dr. Roka, what is your practice?
Hi, everyone. Yeah. Actually, as I said, like in the last few years, I've shifted over from mannitol to MNHS. The reasons being that in the pre-op cases and especially in the post-op cases, there is a very good, edema control with the help of hypertonic saline. And the good thing is that you have to give, like Amit said, 3 days, but I've used up to 4 to maximum of 5 days. And especially with the disruption of the brain, BBB in the surgery or after trauma, like that, there have been many cases where after use of mannitol, although it does help to reduce ICP, to the increase in the edema and the hematoma itself. And with the most cases of hair injury, many of them would be having like many other electrolyte imbalances, causing a diuresis and all would be avoided with the help of HS. So nowadays, preferably in almost all cases where I would need ICP control, I use hypertonic saline. But as Dr. Krishna Samaya said, that ICP monitoring would be ideal for all those cases. But in our centers and many centers worldwide, there are so many other criteria. We monitor the ICP, non-music criteria like based on the CT findings or other clinical findings. So with that also we can, definitely use hypertonic saline. Thank you.
What is Dr. Sabal's practice?
So I've been using it 3 times a day, 100 to 200 ml over 2 hours, followed by Lasix. I have been giving furosemide. And I have been targeting serum sodium around 150s and CVP around 15. So I have found I've got a very good result in case of severe head injuries, those who come with pupillary changes and those who need decompressive hemicraniectomy.
I think it's a very good idea that we can collect the experience of Nepal. Maybe probably Dr. Amit can monitor this one, how we are using, because ICP monitoring, invasive ICP monitoring is not possible everywhere. So as Dr. Roka said, ICP can be assessed by other non-invasive way, whether that is possible or not. That would be a very interesting, and I think since this is a new topic and a lot of our friends are not using so far, but should be a good idea to use it, but provided that we know what are the pros and cons.
And
Thank
just
you. Yes,
Sorry.
Dr.
Sorry, sir.
Praveen wants to say something. Dr. Praveen, please. Dr. Praveen Shrestha.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this chance to
Hello.
speak something
Praveen?
about this. Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Amit, for nice presentation. Well, I just would like to share my small experience about this mannitol or hypertonic saline or Lasix, something like that. So what I often do is in the initial days of ICP management, first I use mannitol along with Lasix or furosemide alternatively. Like for example, mannitol thrice a day and Lasix twice a day. Altogether 5 doses in 24 hours in 4 to 5 hours interval. So I think mannitol and Lasix has very good, this supplementary effect. So that works for at least for first few days. And then if we still need ICP management for another few days, then I switch to hypertonic saline. So my practice is in the beginning I use mannitol and Lasix and followed by this hypertonic saline for another few days time. So if further we need, then of course we have steroids, dexonam, and all those things. So my practice is probably a little bit different: mannitol, Lasix, then followed by hypertonic saline for a few days after that. Yeah.
I would like to add something. Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, sir.
As far as ICP monitoring is concerned, my question is, how many of us are monitoring ICP while using mannitol? The main aim is to reduce the ICP, and how many of us? So we are not using it very, and in one of the study it has been shown, even in USA, 60% of the only ICP monitoring is in 60%. In Europe, they are saying about 34%, and in Canada, it is only 20%. So, in spite of the mannitol, it is much more effective, besides because the immunity, endothelium, and hemodynamically. So, certainly, this hypertonic saline is getting a upper hand over the mannitol. But as far as the ICP monitoring concerned, even in the well advanced center, it is not being used. So we can use it here also. We are using mannitol without using the ICP monitoring. So why not here?
Can I make one more small comment?
Yes,
Sure.
please, sir. Please, sir. Please.
One of the drawback, most of these hereditary patients will also have cerebral heart losing syndrome. So they are hyponatremic, and probably that's why Amit is not transfusing them with a rapid bolus but continuous infusion. Because if you rapidly infuse, and there is always a chance of central pontine myelinolysis, which is not actually, you see it, it's not only in the book. I've seen few cases, my own cases and some other cases from other institutes. So it is also a serious problem associated with hypertonic saline. So do you have something to say about it?
Yes, sir. That's right. Actually, if in case we are giving it in a bolus dosage, chances of electrolyte disturbances is far more higher. And as I have already repeatedly said in my presentation, that there is no single report of a central pontine demyelination occurring in normonatremic patients. It has only been documented in a hyponatremic patient. So if in case a patient is having a hyponatremia and that is severe, then we should be very much careful regarding the use of bolus doses. And it should always be monitored by regular serum sodium charting and at least serum osmolality levels charting. However, what I have gone through a lot of evidences, my take of all these evidences is that we should actually be doing ICP based treatment rather than giving a sodium like this, hypertonic saline as on our own will like that. because that will actually help us to identify the target. If in case the target is achieved, then there's no need of further treatment. So we can discontinue it anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not possible to do ICP monitoring in each and every case. That's the problem. So, the mannitol or hypertonic saline we will be using right and left.
Now,
But then
another. Can I say
Yeah.
something here?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Actually, optic knob sheath diameter has been studied in many places, and it has good correlation with the actual invasive ICP monitoring. So, in the low and middle income countries where other ICP monitors are not available, optic knob sheath diameter is acceptable to indirect the idea of the ICP.
So you mean transocular ultrasound or by MRI?
Yeah, transocular ultrasound.
Okay.
So correct
Here
me if
in our
I'm,
clinical care, they don't. Yes.
so correct me
Yes,
if I'm
Amit.
wrong, but then I have personal experiences with optic nerve sheath diameter too, and we have been doing it very frequently. What I have seen and also being supported by many literature is that if in case optic nerve sheath diameter will definitely tell us about evolving intracranial hypertension. But once the dilatation occurs, if it gives more than, it goes more than 6 millimeter, then whether it is resolving or not, it is not telling us that.
It doesn't say.
sensitively.
Yes, absolutely. It gives yes and no. Ultimately, it's the clinical judgment.
Yes. So what I've seen is like whether it once it reaches the 6 millimeter cutoff value, then we know that ICP is raised. But we do not know when it will come down. Even though the ICP may have come down, actually, the ONSD actually stays on a higher side for a very long time.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Hello. We had a very good discussion.
Can I add a comment, Dr. Gopal? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, please.
Actually, apart from the trauma cases, HS has also been I found it very useful in those steroid-resistant edema, especially those in cases of vascular meningioma. Like you do the surgery, and even after surgery, there's so much of brain swelling which is resistant to the normal menthol or whatever. So in those cases, if you give 3% and stop using Dexona with its side effects, 3% NS has got a very good control. It's very helpful to reduce the edema. So I think for steroid-resistant edema also, HS has got very good effects. So maybe there another study may be needed in this topic also.
In case of trauma, you mean?
In trauma cases, as I said, like if it's needed, I prefer HS over menthol. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, like I was quite surprised, like when one of the companies said that 3% is being used quite a lot here. So I asked him, well, wait, what's so strange about it? Because it's being used worldwide, and I'm sure all the centers in Kathmandu are using it. So, but I didn't know that main centers were not using it actually.
Yeah.
So maybe we can wrap up now.
Yeah.
We had a very good discussion.
I have to leave. Amit, thank you so much for nice presentation. I have to leave, unfortunately.
And Monster, congratulations for your new phone, right?
No.
Your camera is.
I will call you later.
So post-test pani bhaniracheka chhau hai. We have actually organized a post-test also soon after this talk is over. So please, my request everybody is attend that, please. That is required for our authenticity of attending this webinar.
Okay.
And Dr. Gopal, please do the honors of submitting everything here.
So, Dr. Amit, do we have any presentation next week?
Yeah, I have this post-test to be done, so I will continue once this session is called off here. Please.
Okay. So we'll call it off. Let's go for the post-test.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gopal. And since we have been conducting this post-test, so on the screen, if you can see, there's a QR code. So everybody can take a snapshot on a camera and will directly lead to the www.menti.com. And you have to enter the code 140912.